Towards the end of last year, I made a video in which I said that our 2017 Chevrolet Bolt EV had got over 130,000 miles on the clock. And I have a bit of a confession to make. I did that based on what I remembered rather than fact-checking that it had in fact gone over 130,000 miles. I knew it was pretty close, but it's now gone over 130,000 miles. And I figure that in the interests of encouraging people to keep EVs that they own for as long a period as possible, it's about time that we give you an update on our 2017 Chevrolet Bolt EV, explain how it's behaving after 130,000 miles, and discuss any niggles that we have with it. I'm not going to lie, I am a real fan of the Chevrolet Bolt EV. If you've watched this channel for any length of time, you'll know that I've owned two of these over the years. This is actually my wife's 2017 Chevrolet Bolt EV. It is a Premier trim, but before I purchased my Ford F-150 Lightning, I also owned a 2017 Chevrolet Bolt EV. Mine was the base model variant with a convenience and comfort pack that added heated seats and a few other goodies that kept me warm in the winter, but didn't have all of the bells and whistles that this particular model has. If you don't know, this car was purchased used from Platt Auto here in Portland, Oregon, and it was one of the highest mileage vehicles on the lot. My wife traded in her Nissan Leaf, which itself was a used vehicle, for this car because we'd moved in 2019 from downtown Hillsborough, where we used to live, all the way out into the country, and my wife, in pre-pandemic days, was having to drive all the way to her office and then back home at the end of every day. And, well, on a cold day like we have here today, she was having to choose between keeping the heat on and making it home in one charge. So we decided that it was time to upgrade to the Bolt. We knew the Bolt because of my car, and it was a pretty easy decision to make the swap from a Nissan Leaf to a Chevrolet Bolt EV. And because we already owned a 2017 Chevrolet Bolt EV LT, we were very confident in the car, we were very confident that it would fit our needs, and so we opted for a higher mileage vehicle. Of course, in the time since we purchased the car, we've actually had a brand new battery pack put in. That was put in under warranty, not because there was something that had failed in our battery pack, but out of an abundance of caution when GM issued the battery recall program for all 2017 through 2019 Bolt EVs to address an issue with the construction of the battery pack that could, in some circumstances, lead to a short circuit and resulting fire. We got a brand new battery pack complete with a brand new 100,000 mile warranty. And as we pointed out in the past, that has basically provided this vehicle with a really good surefire footing for the future. We now own this car completely. We paid off the loan. It is ours. The retail value of this today, I checked the other day, Carvana is saying somewhere between $6,000 and $7,000 US. I am seeing used 2017 Bolt EV Premiers going from anywhere between $10,000 and about $15,000 US, depending on how many miles and the condition of the vehicle. But we're not interested in selling this, so really value for us is more interesting for insurance purposes than anything else. So let's talk about how the vehicle is behaving after 130,000 miles. Obviously, we got our replacement battery pack somewhere around 90-ish thousand miles. And so we are still a long way from running out our 100,000 mile 8-year battery warranty. You will have seen on the channel a couple of years ago, we had to replace the AC compressor because it was leaking. That was an expensive repair, but we haven't had any other major expenses associated with the car. In fact, we haven't had it serviced in about a year. It is due for its annual checkup, as it were, and the last one it had was literally a free inspection from our local dealership who went, yep, the wheels are still on, the brakes look okay, there are no other issues. And for us, we've had no issues with the car. At the end of last year, as you may have seen on the channel, we replaced the lead acid battery under the hood with a lithium-ion phosphate battery. And so far that battery is doing just fine. I've been keeping an eye on it using the smartphone app that came with the battery. There have been no issues. The car has started up every morning without any problems. And so far, so good. And the same is true of the Nokian Remedy tyres that we put on at the start of autumn. Nokian's Remedy brand are designed as all-weather, not all-season, all-weather tyres. That includes a 3-peak mountain snowflake rating, meaning you can drive a car fitted with them anywhere where it says traction tyres are required. And it's kind of a halfway house between Nokian's full winter tyre and regular all-round tyres. It has more aggressive siping, but at the same time, there's good channels for rain to be expelled from. And here in the Pacific Northwest, where we can have rain and snow in different parts of the region just a few miles apart, it's really useful to have these tyres. The noise while you're driving along at freeway speed is not really anything to get super worried about. The tyres have a really solid feel, there's very minimal body roll, and while we've only probably put a few thousand miles on the car since those tyres were put on, we really don't drive a whole lot these days. Given that we've had some pretty significant rainfall of late, I've also been able to test the Nokian Remedies in basically standing water, and they were very sure-footed. They allowed me to brake, accelerate, and handled impeccably. So well done, Nokian. And if you are in the market for a set of winter-capable tyres, well, you should definitely give the Nokian Remedies a try. In terms of battery health, there's nothing really to report here other than the fact that the car does seem to use a little bit more energy when charging at nighttime. As you know, we have Home Assistant and we record the data from our charging stations. We have just switched over our juice boxes to open EVSE hardware. There's another video on the main channel about that. But I have noticed in the winter that the Bolt is pulling more energy after it's fully charged just to keep the battery pack warm. And if you've watched the channel recently, you'll know we did a video talking about tips for keeping your EV happy during the winter, and keeping your EV plugged in when you're not using it is one way to ensure that the battery pack stays at a decent temperature. Now, up in the mountains where I live, we do get a lot colder temperatures than we do in the valley where I am right now. And I suspect that has led this car to pull power from the grid just to try and keep the battery pack at a sensibly warm, comfortable temperature. But I recently checked out the battery health on this car, and so far, so good. It seems to be just fine. So I don't think it's pulling extra power from the wall because there's something wrong with the batteries or it's losing charge. Rather, I think it's pulling power from the wall, you know, every couple of hours just to make sure that the battery pack stays warm and to replenish any energy that is lost from trying to keep the battery pack warm from the grid rather than pulling it from the battery. The other thing I should probably talk to you about a little bit is how the car is faring after 130,000 miles of people sitting in it. Now, prior to us purchasing this vehicle, I believe it was part of the GM Maven fleet. That fleet no longer exists, but for a while, General Motors did like a car share program where you could sign up if you lived in San Francisco or other major metropolitan areas and basically do the equivalent of a ad hoc car rental when you needed. There was a smartphone app that allowed you to unlock the car and use it. And when we purchased this car, it only had one key fob, so we actually had to buy a second key fob and get that programmed at our own expense at our local dealer, so that both I and my wife both have a key for this vehicle. Despite being used as a fleet car though, the seats have held up really well, and how do I put this? Neither my wife nor I are particularly svelte. I wouldn't say that we are super overweight or anything, but you know, we do put these seats through some wear and tear, and we have dogs as well. And while we do normally use a doggy hammock in the back to protect the dogs while they're traveling, but also protect our seats, the leather is still in very good condition, especially on the driver's seat. And while it does now begin to show the signs of age, I've noticed that this seat particularly, you tend to sink down in it a little bit more than you do the passenger seat. There are no noticeable tears at this point, and so far, fingers crossed, so good. I wish I could say the same was true for the steering wheel though. On this side of the steering wheel, well, it's starting to look a little faded and old. The rubber and the plastic that makes up the steering wheel components on this side of the car, particularly around this left-hand cluster here, started to degrade and peel off, and the leather on the steering wheel is also starting to look kind of tired. You might be watching this at this point and going, sounds like there's nothing really happening with this car that you're upset about or any issues that you're having, and you would be right. This car has been extremely reliable, and thanks to the addition of OpenPilot, specifically FrogPilot, I have a lot of capabilities with this car that I wouldn't otherwise have. So I have lane keep assist that's actually better than the stock lane keep assist. I have semi-autonomous kind of level 2-ish driver assistance, so I can take my hands off when the system is active, and it does a really good job in keeping the car central and making sure that everything works. This particular car, being a 2017 Chevrolet Bolt EV, has a very specific fork of FrogPilot that is capable of adding extra torque. I'm smiling because it is referred to as the band fork by some of the enthusiasts, and it does a pretty good job of keeping the car in the middle of the lane, identifying the lane markings, making sure that I don't go over any lines, making sure that I am not going over speed or anything like that. It's handling that very smooth curve in the road just fine. It's also got some traffic light awareness, although it's not fully active at this point. I generally drive it with my hands on the wheel, and I find that it's good as a kind of a backup driver to make sure I don't do anything stupid. So it's more of an active safety system for me, and I really enjoy using it. I've had very few issues with FrogPilot. Occasionally my comma refuses to come on. I know that comma is sometimes problematic like that. Sometimes it decides it's just not going to boot, and generally you just unplug the power cable at the back, wait a few minutes and reconnect it, and it's all good. So I have nothing really bad to report there either. I have the benefit of accessing other Chevrolet Bolt EVs, and of course our DP owns a Chevrolet Bolt EV, and I get to try that car sometimes and get to note that it does handle slightly differently to this car. I think this car has slightly tighter steering, and I think because of the shoes that we have on it, it tends to feel like it sticks to the road a little bit more tightly than our DP's Bolt EV. But both of the cars are doing incredibly well and handle really well. I know that winter efficiency is a concern with the Bolt EV, and if you don't have access to off-street parking and charging, and you're having to use either charging at your office, which is what a DP does, or make use of public charging infrastructure, the efficiency of driving a Bolt EV in the winter can be far less than it would be if you just keep the car plugged in. I should also note here that the range in winter is reduced. I mean, right now, I think I've probably got like 75% state of charge. The car tells me right now we have 146 miles of range. But I honestly cannot think of the last long distance trip that I made in this car. I think it was probably, honestly, a couple of years ago. When we are doing a longer distance trip, it's usually because we are driving with large amounts of stuff. So we'll take the F-150 Lightning. That is the car that is better suited to long distance travel. It is capable of charging at a higher speed, and it's really a little bit more comfortable for long distance trips. That's not to say that the Bolt EV isn't comfortable as a long distance car, but yeah, that 50 kilowatt maximum DC fast charging capability that this car has does cripple it on long distance trips. If it's your only option, it's still achievable. You can still drive longer distances with it. But if you have an alternative EV, as I do, then it makes sense to take the other EV. So this has become very much a town runabout. Now, because we live out in the country, it's very common for this car to do like a 100-mile round trip in the greater Portland area and come back home and still have plenty of charge left in the battery. So we very rarely drain it to, within an inch of its state of charge life. But when I have had to fast charge it on occasion, it's still worked just fine and has been just fine. I have a family member who has a similarly aged Bolt EV. I believe they have a 19. Our DP has a 19, and one of our family members has a Volt EUV, and they all are capable of using fast charging. I know several people that I know have a CCS to NACS adapter, as do I, and have used it on occasion. It doesn't matter if you're using a NACS Tesla charging station or a CCS Type 2 charging station, you're still going to have slow charging experiences in cold weather, because it's the car, not the charging station, very often that controls the speed that your vehicle is operating at. Next up on the list, let's talk about the ceramic coat that we applied a couple of years ago now. The ceramic coat is doing just fine. It's keeping the paint as good a condition as it can. The paint wasn't in perfect condition when we had the ceramic coat applied. And so far, it's done a really good job of protecting the remaining paint quality that the car had at time of application. We haven't gone back and had any further ceramic coating applied, and we opted for the kind of the 3-year ceramic covering for this car. So in about a year's time, we will need to decide whether we want to have it reapplied or whether we just will forget about it, because at this point, this car is ours and the value of it has depreciated a little bit. I would definitely recommend, if you have an EV that you are considering keeping for a longer period of time, that you do try and get a ceramic coating. Either do it yourself or get it professionally done, as we had. I think it does help you feel good about your car. Certainly if you clean it regularly. This car hasn't been cleaned for like 4 months. So, I mean, I don't go outside every day and go, oh, look, it's a really shiny ceramic coated car. I go outside and go, this car is protected from the elements. I live in the country, there's a lot of mud about, and this car is taking it all in its stride. Aside from the open pilot system that we installed in the car, I'm sure you're aware we did a few other kind of quality of life improvements to this vehicle. The first one being the mirror shades, I'm going to call it. It's basically tinting for your mirrors that allows your rearview mirrors to have less glare from normally obnoxious pickup truck drivers at nighttime, from blinding you. And at this time of year, the mirrors work just fine. I find in the summer, sometimes in direct sunlight, the mirrors do look a little hazy, but I think that's down to me, and I maybe didn't clean the mirrors as well as I should have done before applying the film. But I mean, the film looks great. There's no peeling, there's no sign of surface deterioration, and at nighttime they work incredibly well. The rear view mirror here on this particular trim variant of the Bolt EV has an auto dim function, and it also has a little button hidden. See if I can remember which side it is. It's on this side. that allows you to adjust how reactive the mirror is to direct light from behind. I will say I wish that this dimmed more, because even in its most reactive setting, I find it doesn't always dim enough to make that experience a pleasant one, but it does do its job. The other upgrades that we had planned, the infotainment upgrade, we still haven't put that in yet. And I'm sorry, the weather here has been absolutely abysmal. It's not been particularly pleasant to spend a lot of time outside, and I would have to spend a lot of time outside pulling the car apart and putting the new infotainment system in. While we haven't put in the new non-scratched infotainment system, I will say though that the CarLink It 2 CarPlay adapter that we put in is really good. It's still working. You can update it using the app that is downloadable for Android and iOS, and so far it's behaving itself. Occasionally it doesn't notice that you've got in with a compatible phone, and sometimes you have to unplug it and then plug it back in. But since the USB sockets are down here, it's something you can do very easily. Just yank it out, count to 5, plug it back in, it reboots, and then usually it connects just fine. It's actually a little bit more reliable than the CarPlay systems that I've seen in production brand new EVs. The heated seats still work incredibly well. There's still a little bit of a gunking up here on the fast forward and home buttons. It's dependent on temperature, but that will get replaced when we put the new screen in. And that screen really does need to go in soon, because this one has stopped responding. It's a common bug with the Bolt EV, and it's the only real niggle that I have with this car at this point. We haven't put in a new air filter this year, although we will be putting one in probably in the spring. We tend to renew them in the spring. And we use a HEPA, aftermarket HEPA filter. I'll try and remember to link to the model number in the down below. It just improves the air cabin quality a lot better. There's no issues with the cabin kind of getting too damp or steaming up or anything. Although if it's a really super cold day, you do sometimes find if it's damp and cold that sometimes you get a little bit of condensation on the rear of the car if you haven't properly warmed the cabin up. The last thing I really want to talk about here is the telematics for this car. They are becoming less reliable. Now, OnStar has been around for years. OnStar's telematics for EVs is not known as being one of its strongest selling points, and we actually pay GM a monthly subscription for its OnStar access and also for its monitoring. And we do that because back when one of my kids was a bit of a reckless teenager, they borrowed my Chevrolet Bolt and took it for a little spin. And while they are now in their 20s and are grown up and doing really well, and I'm teaching them to drive using this car, we've kept that feature in, even though they don't live with us. It's just nice to know that should someone borrow our car again, we can identify where it is pretty quickly. But when it comes to the EV telematics, it really is very hit and miss. And I feel I should preface that, or maybe add a postscript, let me know which one that would be in the down below, to say that because I live up in the mountains, cell phone reception up where I live is abysmal, and sometimes the OnStar commands don't always get sent to our car in a timely and appropriate manner. And that can sometimes leave us with, we send a command to do the remote start and it doesn't actually happen. And that can be frustrating. For about 6 months, OnStar just didn't work. It didn't properly update our state of charge. It didn't properly do the remote start and stop. And I signed out of all of the apps, and then I think I turned off the car for a bit. When we re-enabled everything, it started working again. And the Home Assistant app that I have that communicates with the car, that allows me to tie in my home automation system. So for example, I can command the car to turn on at a certain time if the outside temperature on our deck is below a certain level, it will automatically turn the car on and defrost it. If the temperature is above a set amount, it won't do it. That now all works again, which is phenomenal. And I say it works 90% of the time. There's still, like this morning, this didn't want to work. Yesterday it worked just fine. So some days it works and some days it doesn't. So that's pretty much it. Yes, this car is a little tired now in terms of, you know, it's been used, it's been loved, but it's still holding together. There's minimal kind of rattles or noise. The center console still needs to be tightened up. I haven't got around to doing that yet. But this is a car. It's a 2017 model. We are now in 2025. This doesn't feel like an 8-year-old car. And I think that's the thing that I want to reiterate about the Bolt and how reliable it is. It just feels still like it's a fairly modern EV. Sure, you know, if you look at some of the UI and how you interact with it, sure, it does start to show its age. But if you're in the market for a new EV and you are considering a used Bolt, I still think it's one of the best deals that you can get today if you live in North America. What if you live in Europe and you want to get one of the Ampera E's, which are kind of rare? Well, I wouldn't. The Ampera E doesn't have official support per se in Europe, based on conversations that I've had with folks, and I feel that a lot of people, if they bought one, would be on their own. And some people are okay with that, other people not so much. But I have been thinking about adding some new features to this car, along with all the other planned upgrades that I still haven't done, that would give me a rear fog light, utilizing parts from the European Ampera. Or the European Ampera E. I must remember to add the E on the end, because the Ampera was basically the European version of the Volt. The Ampera E is the European version of the Bolt. I think it might be possible, so I'm going to have a look into that in the near future. And that really is it. I'm going back up into the mountains now, and we have fog. So I had to turn off the auto headlights and put the dipped beams on. Unfortunately, while there are auto headlights and auto high beams on this trim variant of the Bolt EV, you don't have kind of an automatic fog lamp detection system. Detecting fog's really hard, and I can't think of any EVs that have automatic fog lights, although if you know of some, I'm sure you'll let me know in the down below.
Thanks for joining me today, and if you've got thoughts, make sure you leave them in our Discord chat room, on our Patreon page, or you can reach out to us on Mastodon or Blue Sky. Thanks to the amazing list of people scrolling by on your screen right now. They are part of the massive community of fans around the world that help fund this channel through Patreon and YouTube, covering our bills, paying our team, and making sure that we can remain 100% independent. If you'd like to join them and see your name listed here, just follow the links below. We now have new Patreon tiers that support a wide range of donation amounts, ranging from $1.50 US a month, or if you'd prefer, about $15 a year. A massive welcome to our newest supporters: Carol Bulawa, Anna Atamelodian, Scott Wilson, Obi-Wan, Merrick Hurst, Smokey Lothar, Falafel Kosa, J01, Gary, Christopher, Randall Astaro, and Dimitri. To join the list and get your shout out, become a paid Patreon member for your moment of fame. And remember, you can now gift a membership to someone else. If you'd like to support us with a one-off donation, you'll also find links below to make Ko-fi and Bitcoin donations, and we even have a good old-fashioned PO box you can reach us at. Address you'll also find below. And if you're in need of some swag, our TE swag store is also linked. So we can focus on making our content even better this year and reduce team burnout, we're switching our release days to Tuesday, Thursday and Saturday on our main channel, and if you like something a little more laid back at the weekend, over on Take 2 you'll find a release there on a Sunday. Transport Evolved is going through some pretty big changes this year though, so keep your eyes and ears peeled as we have some more exciting ways you can support us, and more exciting ways to interact with us coming very soon. If you want more, the mighty algorithm thinks you'll like this video, but we also think that this one is well worth a look. See you soon, and as always, keep evolving!